We'll start with trade, we'll get to the markets, and I know you've got a lot to say on it. Are you as pragmatic as the Dutch Prime Minister about dealing with the United States and ultimately coming to some kind of trade truce?
Yes, I am, and I was happy to hear the comments made by the U.S. President here in Davos that he is looking to have a quick negotiation with Europe to conclude a trade deal as soon as possible. I heard the President of the Commission, who we should inform the U.S. public is negotiating on behalf of all European countries, say that we could get a deal done in weeks. I don't know if it's going to be weeks or months, but I think that the ingredients are here for a deal that's going to be a win-win solution for both.
Well, let's compare and contrast the comments on Tuesday from the administration, softer, Wednesday, a whole lot harder. Not just from the President, who basically said that Europe in some ways is worse than China on trade, but also from the Secretary, Stephen Mnuchin of the Treasury, essentially saying that if you arbitrarily put a tax on digital companies, we'll arbitrarily put them on auto companies as well. I just wonder, your take, whether some European officials are being slightly naive about what could be coming down the road towards them a little bit later this year.
Well, I'm fully aware that this is not going to be an easy negotiation, but I still believe that it is in the interest of both trading blocs to reach an agreement as soon as possible. And I think as we also enter an electoral year in the U.S., and to the extent that trade seems to be the major concern as far as global growth is concerned, I think that we see the world through, I think, a relatively similar prism, and I think that an agreement will be reached.
But this is important. There's been bonds broken with China, but China is distant and very much on the other side of the world. There are many relationships here. Just as an example, Matthew Prince of Cloudflare, of course, making a huge splash in Davos with his new piano bar, married at Mykonos. We had a surveillance wedding.
Are you promoting a piano bar?
No, I'm promoting tourism.
You're promoting marriages in
Greece.
Mykonos.
No, I'm promoting
not just
tourism,
Mykonos,
but
Where is this
tourism.
going?
Wait, I'm promoting tourism among all these nations in a much closer link across the Atlantic than in China. We had a surveillance wedding in Greece that we all survived over the last 18 months as well. Do we risk, Prime Minister, breaking those cultural and social relationships with a trade war with America?
That is why I was always very concerned about this issue, and that's why I remain cautiously optimistic. I studied in the U.S. I know the U.S. very well, and I'm fully aware that what unites us goes beyond common economic interests. There is a bond of fundamental values of democracies. I mean, Greece. Look at Greece. We'll be celebrating 200 years since our War of Independence in 1821, a war that was inspired by the founding fathers. So let's look at the big picture. Understand what unites us is much more than what separates us. And if we have to both back off a little bit from maximalistic approaches,
do you sense that from the President of the United States? Is he being too adversarial in initiating these discussions?
Look, when I saw him at the White House, I encouraged him to get a deal done with Europe. And again, I will, I listened to his comments here in Davos, and I think the general perception is that we're in a good path.
Well, let's talk about the perception of Europe, politically speaking. I live in New York alongside Tom. We used to live in the same building as well. We don't.
We're not in speaking terms anymore, so it doesn't work out.
We'll move on from that very quickly.
No marriage.
I will say, though, I hope not. I will say, though, that the perception of Europe is that it's full of socialists. It's full of left-wing politicians.
That's very wrong.
And we're going to get to that in a moment. It's full of left-wing politicians that don't want to do business, are only interested in barriers to entry, and put in a big brick rule around the bloc. Centre-right politics, the future of that in Europe. What is it?
We want on a centre-right agenda.
Yep.
Liberal reforms, reducing taxes, deregulation, an inclusive economy. We got 40%. We have an absolute majority. We beat the populists of the left and the right at their own game. And I think this sends a very positive signal that traditional centre-right parties in Europe, provided they have the right agenda, can actually win elections. They can beat the populists and certainly can beat the rhetoric of the left, which in Greece essentially led us to a second crisis.
In my many conversations with Greek leadership of another time and place pre-crisis, there was a belief that if Greece could right its ship, the money would come back from those abroad of Greece. Is that occurring? Do you see a new confidence where the money's actually coming back to Greece?
It is coming back. It's coming back, by Greeks who live abroad. It's coming back by Greeks who've decided to invest in Greece. But it's also coming, from foreign investors who, for the first time, look at Greece and say, "Hey, we have a convincing investment thesis here." And as you know, markets have been very good with Greece since we got elected. Look at our bond yields.
Excuse me, they've not been very good. They've been a miracle. Our Matthew Winkler his document.
I believe
it is a miracle, right?
175 on 10s, I believe, at the moment, just as we speak.
Actually, probably lower than that.
Yeah.
But lower than Italy on many days. But it does make sense. We have a stable government. We don't have elections for 3.5 years. We have an absolute majority. We're delivering on real reforms. So why wouldn't it happen?
The fast money's come back. And I overheard a brief conversation, and I'm sure you won't mind me sharing. An investor saying to you, you are a legend of the hedge fund community.
Well, that's kind of them to say.
Best performing equity market in the world, I believe, last year. Fantastic amount of money. But you know the conviction level to put money into a market is a whole lot lower than it takes to put money into the ground, to build a factory, and to start investing in the country.
That's
again.
why we focus so much on deregulation, on addressing issues such as bureaucracy, licensing. If you look at, for example, what's happening in real estate is real money on the ground. Real estate prices are up by 11% in 2019. I expect a similar trend in 2020. You look at big emblematic investments, such as the old airport in Ellinikon, it's been unblocked. So what I find very interesting is that real companies are putting real money on the ground. Some of the big tech companies in the US are interested in Greece. We have Pfizer setting up an AI center in Greece, just taking advantage of the incredible amount of talent that we have in the country. So this is not just about tourism. It's not just about the sun or the beaches. It's about a country that is moving out of a crisis at a very fast pace.
You got some big targets, 100 billion euros of direct investment.
Well, that is the maximum we can get.
But let's talk about time frame. How quickly do you think you can get that kind of investment into the country?
We need that over 7 to 8 years, but we still have a significant capital gap to bridge, and that is my main concern, how to get foreign direct investment in the country. It is already happening. It will continue to happen for 2020, and I'm quite optimistic about it.
Prime Minister, in the time that we have left with you, your family is one of the heritage of Greece well back into the 20th century. You have seen many Turkeys to the east. Explain to us now how you perceive the new Mr. Erdogan. It's been a changed Erdogan since 2002. How do you perceive Turkey to the east?
Look, Turkey has been difficult to deal with. We've honestly said that we want a good and constructive relationship with Turkey, but overall the behavior of Turkey has been on the very aggressive side. They signed a deal with Libya, which is completely unacceptable to Greece regarding the delimitation of maritime zones. It's an illegal deal. That's what the European Union said. That's what the US said. So there's a constant state of provocation that I think will lead Turkey nowhere. We want to engage with Turkey on issues such as migration, which is a big challenge for us.
How do you do that when they have so many refugees and there's always this threat that they're just going to open the door and let them all pour into the European
Well, first of all, you can't deal with refugees by using desperate people as a geopolitical wedge.
Is that what the Turkish are doing?
Well, that's what they've implied. I'm not saying they're doing it, but I'm also saying at the same time that we have an agreement as a European Union with Turkey. It can work well. It has worked well in the past. We need to stick to it. We need to update it. And we need to decouple migration from the other issues that we have. And I think we can do that.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm thinking, what, Athens in February and maybe a little later
No, let's go a little bit later.
A little bit later in the year.
You're making a mistake because we want to extend the season.
Okay.
It's a lovely time to come in Athens in the winter or in the spring or in the fall. You don't all need to come in July and August. It's actually very crowded.
He sounds like the mayor of Venice.
The Prime Minister.
Don't all come together, please.